I'm a little bit upset. During the break, I was reading about how the bipartisan police bill ultimately it failed. Democrats had to walk away because Republicans, led by Tim Scott, did not accept the final Democratic deal. We talked about this on the show before, Clay. Most of us knew for months that the end was near for this bill, and at the end of the day, we're here now, and it looks like we got nothing.
Wow. So, but here's my thing, Amisha. Why did anybody think Cotton to Congress, Tim Scott, would do the right thing? The brother didn't even vote for the January 6th commission. This is Cotton to Congress, Tim Scott. I should call him Jim Crow Scott. That's who he is. Why did anybody? I mean, I like Cory Booker. I like Senator Booker. Cool. Y'all trusted him, this brother, that he would do the right thing? Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce, the first Black senators who were Republicans in Reconstruction, are rolling in their graves at Cotton to Congress, Tim Scott. Why? Y'all should have let us down months ago. The minute they said that, Amisha, I was like, okay, why y'all even? And what? Make this make sense, Amisha? I don't understand.
I think that because he was a blackface, Republicans don't have any other Black senators, because he was a blackface, that they wanted to tie it to someone who was of the community. But also, we watched the trajectory of this bill change over the past few months. Obviously, in the wake of the George Floyd protests, there was resonation across America. Police reform need to happen. Police reform need to happen. Then we saw the police unions push back. Then we saw crazy Donald Trump push very heartily against it. And then we saw a rise that was over exaggerated by Republicans and conservative media, a rise in violent crime. And they used that to basically put a nail in the coffin of anything police reform. It was, if you cut funding to the police, look what's going to happen. People are going to come and rob your house. Your kids are going to get raped. People are going to get shot. This is what happens. Look at Chicago. Look at Detroit. Look at New York. All of this is because you guys want police reform. And I think that because they ran that day in and day out for months, and people's cars were getting carjacked, things changed. Now, granted, I don't think Republicans would have stood by this bill and wanted police reform regardless of all those situations. But I do think that the conservative media played a major role in watching this thing unfold miserably in terms of getting any type of real support.
I know that Rep. Karen Bass must be just outraged because she was working with Senator Tim Scott. Cory Booker released a statement about the George Floyd Policing Act failing. He said, quote, "Unfortunately, even with this law enforcement support and further compromises we offered," Democrats always trying to compromise, "there is still too wide a gulf with our negotiating partners, and we face significant obstacles to securing a bipartisan deal." And listen, they're going to blame Joe Biden. They're going to blame Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. There is this thing called Congress. You can't do an executive order for this. You better blame Cotton to Congress. Blame him. He knows what he's doing. Go ahead, De Niro. Your thoughts on this foolishness.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just going to ask.
No, go on.
Because a lot of people say that they have a talking point of, Democrats are trying to be bipartisan. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what the structure of this country is. We're supposed to work together. But we have people like Kristen Sinema who also did not vote on the January 6th commission. Like
Dixiecrat.
I mean, right. I mean, she told us that she was, a feminist. She ran a campaign on the fact that she was a feminist.
She was bisexual.
Right, and I'm bisexual too, and people ate that up. But it's just like, I mean, I never ate it up, but it's just like, I mean, come on. And then she came in, and it's showing where you getting your funds from? Who's funneling your campaign?
Well, I mean, here's the issue: is that with the Republican Party, they get in line, and when they don't get in line, they're out. Look at Miss Mia Love in Utah. When she didn't get a line in the Trump era, the only Black woman rep in the House, she was out. But Democrats, we got Joe Manchin, who's a Dixiecrat. We got Kristen Sinema, who's a Dixiecrat, and we allegedly got some other ones who aren't saying it. But then my only thing is that
we also have to look at people who identify as Democrats who aren't Democrats. Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not a Democrat.
But they do vote in line. They do vote in line, though. They don't vote like a Christian cinema. If you're more to the left, to the left, to the left, that's cool with me. As long as we need your vote. But Bernie does vote in line. He's not. He voted for the George Floyd Policing Act. But I think what bothers me is that when I like Rep. Karen Bass and I like Senator Cory Booker, but y'all were trying to convince us you could get this done. Did you, if respectfully, Rep. Karen Bass and Senator Cory Booker, and I'd love to have Rep. Bass on the show, did y'all really believe that in the Congress, Tim Scott would come on your side? Because they kept saying his name. Did you really think he would do it? Really? Go ahead, Daniel.
Tim Scott was the same guy that said woke supremacy was a greater threat than white supremacy. So, I mean,
throughout his senatorial history, Tim Scott has not done anything for Black progress or Black policy. So this was not going to be the first, landmark experience for the man. So I don't think that they ever assumed that he would. It just helped to have a package of a Black man speaking on this out front. And that's what Republicans needed. It had absolutely nothing to do with honestly thinking that he was going to move the needle forward. And I don't think that no matter how long negotiations lasted, that it was going to change things. He was going to stall and he was going to shut this thing down from the start. This has just been a very long dance in a hall that was inevitable in terms of its ending. We all knew how this was going to end the moment that the bipartisan talks began. There was never going to be a compromise that was going to work.
Let me say this. Here's what I would like, though. I understand in the beginning, Rep. Bass and Senator Booker didn't want to say anything. Now I wish they would go on TV and rip into Senator Tim Scott, destroy him, rip into him, publicly say what he didn't do, what he did do, how he lied. Because at this point, so you mean to tell me after this quote unquote racial reckoning, this racial uprising, all these things happen and the NFL allegedly is going to have the lift every voice and sing before this and all these performative acts. We're not going to have any legislation. Y'all better get out there and do some good messaging and say what happened. Why y'all don't cover for him? Break down what happened. Shame him. Shame, because that MF is going to be running for president. And I think it's a good chance that the next Black president might be a Republican. So I need y'all to shame him, blast him, say what he's doing. Let us know. It just didn't work out. What the F happened? Because when the Republicans don't get in line, like Liz Cheney, they censor them. They will destroy them. Can you at least go hard on the other side and explain how they advocated against you? Because Senator Booker keeps saying that Senator Scott is his friend. Go ahead, De Niro.
I'm going to look into what Senator Booker is saying, but I hear you, Clay. I truly do hear you. I also put pressure on people who identify as Democrats, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, wearing the tax the rich dress, going to the Met Gala and things like that. Performative acts, people who sleep on the steps of Congress as opposed to drafting legislation. Like, I mean.
Wait, are you critiquing Cori Bush?
I am.
Why? What was wrong with that? She managed to stop folks from being thrown out of their house. I mean, she managed to pause that. I thought that was a great thing to do. Yeah, I mean, because before that, it wasn't going. It was that eviction. What was it called? The eviction moratorium that was going to be no more. And because she protested with Ayanna Pressley as well, they were able to delay it, which may have gave folks more time. As somebody who was homeless when I was very young, more time is everything. So I don't think she's the enemy. Tell me why you say that.
I mean, she works in the legislative branch of Congress.
Right.
AOC works in the legislative branch of Congress.
They're also newer members and they can't bring everybody along. I think that I hear what you're saying here, but the fact is both of them have served in Congress. Cori Bush is even newer than her. They don't have seniority. We know that the House of Representatives, though it is controlled by Democrats, it is not controlled by Democrats at the level that it needs to be for them to basically squash Republican views or Republican votes. They still have to bring conservatives over. And that this process is going to be long and arduous because there are just, quite frankly, far too many Republicans who don't give a damn about Black, brown, disabled, veterans, or anybody else who is facing housing insecurity. They don't care. And I think that what they were trying to do was ensure that there was a stopgap measure while they were still pushing for and working through Congress, because we can't act as though those progressive members haven't also been trying to push housing reforms through Congress, because they have, and many of them ran on it. But they also have been pushing those things since they took their oath of office in there. So I think that we have to be honest to the fortitude that both Cori Bush and AOC, as well as several others, particularly CBC members, have had around reducing homelessness and housing insecurity for years now. This isn't, they're not new to this.
I mean, I hear a lot of talk about it, but I don't see a lot of, and I see a lot of co-sponsored legislation. I don't see a lot of sponsored legislation from the members of the squad. What I do see is that people elevate AOC because of things that she says, and it goes viral. And this is what I have with a lot of people in my generation who disrespect Gen X. Like, generations before us, you can't stand on the shoulders of generations before us to tell us that they haven't done anything. Like, that's my biggest problem, that I try to bridge gaps between people in my generation and people younger than me with people who are older than me. We can't praise Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for holy pictures, as Speaker Pelosi calls it. You want to go to the border and just take pictures when you can draft legislation. Look at Lauren Underwood. Like, look at the Omnibus Act. Look at how she's going. She's trailblazing, but you don't see her having a book deal or anything like that, like Cori Bush does. Lauren Underwood is working. Lauren Underwood is what AOC thinks she is. I am not attacking AOC. I'm holding her accountable.
I mean, I don't know when I think
AOC bashing session, because I'm not. That's not me. I'm not here to pro her or against her, but I am saying that there are levers in the congressional in the congressional instrument that ensure that those who have been in Congress longer have seniority. The bills that they sign on to or sponsor are ones that get heard more and are uplifted in a way that newer members are not. That's how Congress has always been. As a Illinois person, as a representative of Illinois, in everything that I do, I'm very familiar with the work of Lauren Underwood. I think that because she comes from the medical field, because she is someone who made a name for herself across the state before she even made it to DC, and because she isn't out here trying to be a star. There are some Congress people who are on both sides of the aisle. She's somebody who just wants to get the work done. But you also have to recognize that everything that Lauren Underwood does has a senior rep on board with her. And I think that that definitely makes a difference. She's not going out here doing all these things by herself. We see Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who was pushing the omnibus, and having those women's health, particularly minority women's prenatal care and things like that, conversations long before Lauren Underwood ever entered Congress. So we have to give credit where credit's due as well.
Absolutely.
Also, I do want to add as far as co-sponsoring legislation. I remember that Ilhan Omar and Ayanna Pressley, they co-sponsored legislation to do rent forgiveness versus pausing the rent, to do actual rent forgiveness. That just didn't make it through. AOC has co-sponsored, I believe, almost 40 pieces of legislation. It may not, and the biggest one, of course, is the Green New Deal Act. Of course, that doesn't make it as far as headline news, but I wouldn't say that AOC or Jamal Bowman or some of these newer folks who are getting into Congress, I wouldn't say they're just like an Elliot Engel, who was in Jamal Bowman's seat before him. I wouldn't say they're just sitting there fanning themselves. I think they are doing some actual work. They are co-sponsoring legislation. It's just a matter of getting it through, because this process of politics is so convoluted. It's so messy. It's so destructive. I'm all about holding folks accountable. I totally get that. But I do appreciate, I do appreciate that Cori Bush went and protested. I love legislation going through, but when it's not going through, if you have to protest to at least pause it, to give people more time, I really appreciate, and I value that, because I don't see a lot of Congress folks who will go that far to sleep on the steps of Congress. I don't think it was just performative. I think it was saying we have to do something. Now, mind you, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court, I believe they said, you know what, we're not going to hold this up, but at least folks had a month or two. But I see a lot of work they've done, but it's just a matter of getting it through, and that's just the arduous process of politics. But that said, I'll let you comment on that, De Niro. I don't think, as much as I disagree with pretty much all of them at some point, but I don't think AOC and Ayanna Pressley and Jamal Bowman, some of these freshman members of Congress, I don't think they are the enemies. I think it's the other side who, like you said earlier, will not even compromise and work with us on something as important and crucial as a George Floyd policing act. Because Ayanna Pressley and AOC, they want even more. They want even more that was in that act. So they're like, okay, we're not going to get that. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
They're looking at it from a different lens, but they're not going to get what they want. So they compromised, right? Okay, we'll deal with that. We won't even deal with that. But the other side, they're the real demons. Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, AOC, Susan Collins. They're the evil one. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. No. That's what, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm not taking away from that. Like I said, I'm just holding people accountable. That's all I'm saying. And of course, the GOP is the reason why we're in this morality crisis and where we are. But I mean, also paying attention to what members get, what legislation gets out of committee. Like that's also what I'm paying attention to too. Who's co-sponsoring and who's sponsoring who's actually writing legislation in the legislative branch of Congress. You can protest, and it's like I tell all of my friends too. You can protest. There's so many ways that you can help what's going on. There's people who protest. There's people who's out on the front lines, working on legislation, doing things like that. We can't legislate by emoting. We have to put action behind words. We can't just post a black square and call it a day. This is for anybody, white, black, brown, indigenous, person of color, whomever. It's about action. Like you have to act. Where do you go from emotions? Yes, we all have these same emotions about Breonna Taylor, about George Floyd, about whatever, but where do you put it into action? That's what I want to talk about when we talk about community building, action, strategy. What's the plan?
I think we just have to be real with our audience, the listening audience, that, there are hundreds of bills that go, thousands of bills actually, but hundreds sometimes by one person in terms of somebody who's trying to lead the charge on a particular issue that will never make it out of committee. So just because someone it doesn't appear on a docket doesn't mean that they have not put in the work to try and make that happen. I think about people like Teddy Kennedy, who was working towards healthcare reform for 40 plus years before we saw the Affordable Care Act come out. This man was literally on his deathbed. So we cannot act as though these high level instances of policy change aren't being pushed by those who we have elected, particularly those within the Democratic Party, because we've seen it time and time again. But there's a lot that goes on in the sausage making, as they call it, behind the scenes that makes a lot of this extremely arduous. And that's honestly how the founders wanted it to be. They did not want it to be an easy process for you to get bills passed, for you to develop the level of esteem, even in that congressional body, to actually make a difference. They wanted there to be that push and pull, that tug, that level of compromise, that dissidence there before you actually got something done. And I would argue that in the modern times, a lot of that dissidence has been so great that it has taken generations for us to see a bill get passed. But that doesn't mean that we have a ton of congressional members that are sleeping on their laurels here. Like I don't think that that's the case.
And I do want to say, it looks like Ayanna Pressley, she's been in office longer, obviously. She's co-sponsored over 1,000 pieces of legislation. I just want to give Miss Ayanna Pressley her props. I believe she's absolutely she's doing the work.
And again, I'm not attacking these people. Let me just say that I'm not attacking our members of Congress in that way. I'm just holding people accountable. So if we all have to be on the same message. I will agree that we have a messaging problem and we need to get on the same page. This is why I say we have to build bridges and build gaps between communities. My generation has to listen to Gen X, period. Like there's no question about that. We're not going to stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and spit on everything that they've done. That's wrong. And we have to take that torch and run with it, but we have to listen to them first.
Denir, wait a minute. I think I see what you're saying. You're saying that you feel like some of these younger folks have been shitting on the folks who came before them. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's a component of it, yeah.
The younger folks in Congress have been like shitting on some of the folks who came before them. I do get that. They run their mouth. I definitely get that.
and the elders in Congress today shitted on the people who were older than them when they were younger. So I feel like that just
did. They sure did.
We got to stop it. You know what I mean?
We do. You're right.